I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to put together the mess that's been my life lately. My name's Ryan, and I was with my wife, Emily, for about 5 years. When we first got together, everything seemed perfect, or at least I thought it was. She was the kind of girl who always looked stunning, confident, a little bitchy in that way that made you think she knew she was the best thing around. And honestly, I loved that about her. She was fun, sharp, kind of a firecracker, and I thought I hit the jackpot. We got married last year after a pretty quick engagement. I mean, I was head over heels, and she was Emily. She had this attitude that she was better than most people, but she could be sweet when she wanted to be. We moved into a nice house, had a good job each, and everything looked perfect from the outside. When she told me she was pregnant about 6 months ago, I was ecstatic. We wanted this so badly, and I couldn't wait to be a dad. I thought our future was set, that we were in it for the long haul. But something started feeling off, little things that I brushed aside at first. She began lying about where she was going or who she was with. She'd get weirded out if I asked questions, and her phone became her most prized possession. I'd catch her hiding it when I came into the room or when she'd get a message and quickly lock the screen. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong, so I thought maybe I was just paranoid. It's easy to let your mind wander when you're anxious about a kid on the way. Still, I kept an eye on her, trying to ignore that gnawing feeling in my gut. One day, I was home earlier than usual, work got canceled, and I decided to surprise her. I figured I'd show up at the house, maybe cook dinner, just do something nice. I parked in front of the house and saw her car wasn't there. That alone wasn't strange, but then I noticed her phone on the counter, screen lit, and some messages I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a second, heart pounding, then I grabbed her phone to take a quick peek. I wasn't planning to snoop, but something about the way she'd been acting made me suspicious. I just wanted to know she was okay, that she wasn't hiding anything major. As I scrolled through her messages, I saw texts that made my stomach drop. Not innocuous stuff, no, these were flirty, suggestive, downright inappropriate. The name in her messages was Jake, and I immediately knew who that was. Jake is her best friend's brother, pretty much the last person I'd ever think she'd cheat with. I couldn't believe it. It was like being punched in the chest. My mind spun. I stared at the screen, reading messages about their plans to meet up, talk late into the night, and even talk about the sex they'd had. I mean, I knew she'd been acting distant, but I never thought she'd be screwing her best friend's brother behind my back. I took a deep breath and put her phone back. I already knew I couldn't confront her without proof. I decided I had to find more. So I started digging. I checked her social media, her email, and even her call logs. Every piece of evidence confirmed she'd been sneaking around for weeks. The worst part, she was pregnant with my kid. I found out from her a month ago when she told me she was 6 months along. I thought I was happy that I was going to be a dad, but now I see it was all a lie. That girl lied about everything, about being faithful, about loving me, about being the perfect wife. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife, Emily, cheating on me with her best friend's brother, Jake, and she was pregnant with my child. I couldn't even look at her now without feeling that burning betrayal. Every time I saw her face, I saw that look of innocence she put on when she lied. I saw the way she'd look at me sometimes, like I was stupid, like I didn't notice what she was doing behind my back. And the worst part, I was so blind, so naive, that I never saw it coming until it was right in front of me. I've never felt so betrayed in my life. After I found everything out, I didn't know what to do. My head was spinning, and honestly, I felt numb. I kept telling myself I should confront her right away, but part of me was afraid of what she might say, if she'd even tell the truth. Instead, I decided to watch her, see what she would do. I needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went and whether she was planning to keep lying or if she'd come clean. That night she came home late, smelling like perfume and sex, probably from Jake, I figured. She was acting normal, maybe a little defensive when I asked where she'd been. She tried to brush me off, calling me paranoid or insecure, and that's when I snapped. I told her I knew everything. Her face lost all that fake sweetness, and her eyes narrowed in that bitchy way she always did when she was caught. She started with the usual denials, saying I was imagining things, that I was just paranoid, that she loved me and would never cheat on me. But I wasn't buying any of it. I told her I had proof, that I knew about the messages, about Jake, about her lying to me. And that's when she turned up the attitude. She looked at me like I was some kind of idiot and said, "You're overreacting, Ryan. You're just insecure because you're about to be a dad. It's not like I did anything wrong. We're just friends and I don't owe you an explanation for what I do." Her words hit me like a slap. She was so bitchy, so dismissive of my feelings. I felt my blood boiling and I told her, "You're full of shit. I saw the messages. Don't lie to me now. I know you've been screwing Jake and I know you're pregnant with his kid. How could you do this to me?" She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "Oh, please, that's a lie. I never cheated on you. You're just jealous, Ryan. You're insecure because I don't give you enough attention. And maybe if you weren't so obsessed with spying on me, you'd see that I love you. But I don't owe you an explanation for my life." Her tone was sharp and her attitude was so typical Emily, bitchy, manipulative, and totally unremorseful. I felt my hands tighten into fists. I was furious, but I also felt this deep, painful ache in my chest. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me like this? She'd been lying to my face for months, probably more. The idea that she was carrying Jake's child made me want to scream. I looked at her and saw that cold, calculating look, like she knew she was in control, like she thought she could just brush me off and keep this secret forever. I couldn't stand it anymore. I told her I needed to think, that I couldn't be with her anymore. She just smirked and said, "Whatever, Ryan, do what you want. But you're wasting your time trying to control me. I'm not yours to own." That's when I realized that I had lost the woman I loved, not just because she cheated, but because she'd become someone I didn't even recognize. The woman I thought I knew was a liar, a cheat, and a bitch who thought she was above everything. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been kicked in the gut. I kept replaying everything: the lies, the sneaking around, the texts, her dismissive attitude. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and betrayal that was so intense I thought I might burst. I wondered how I could have been so blind, how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see the truth sooner. And yet I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep pretending this was just a misunderstanding. It was real and it was horrifying. The next day, I decided I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I packed a bag, told her I was leaving for a few days to clear my head, and I left. I didn't want to see her face, didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I needed space, time to process what I'd discovered and what it meant for my future. The betrayal cut so deep that it felt like I was walking around with a knife in my chest. I knew I had to figure out what was next, but right then, all I could think about was how much I'd been played, how I'd trusted her with everything, and she'd just thrown it all away for some bastard brother of her friend. Now I was left with nothing but questions and a broken heart, trying to understand how someone who once promised forever could turn out to be this treacherous. And I kept asking myself, how do I move on from this? The days that followed were a blur of anger, confusion, and a hollow sense of betrayal. I stayed away from her, not just because I couldn't stand to see her face, but because I needed to get clarity. My mind kept spinning in circles, replaying everything I found out, every little lie she told, every sneaky move she made. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I kept thinking was how I'd been so blind, so naive. She was the perfect bitch, always acting like she was better than everyone else, and I never saw the cracks in her facade until it was too late. I reached out to a few friends, people I trusted, just to talk it through. Some of them told me to just walk away, that she was a liar and a cheat, and I deserved better. Others told me to confront her again, to make sure I got every detail straight. But I knew deep down that there was no way I'd get any real answers from Emily now. She was so good at lying and twisting the truth, she'd probably deny everything, call me crazy, or accuse me of violating her privacy again. I decided I had to see her face to face, settle this once and for all. I went back to the house knowing she'd be there. When I walked in, the atmosphere was tense, heavy with unspoken words. She was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, giving me that bitchy glare that made my blood boil. I told her I came to hear her explain herself. Somehow I wanted her to admit the truth, even if I knew she'd never do it willingly. She looked at me with that innocent, fake smile like she was trying to act like everything was fine. Ryan, I don't know what you think you found, but you're overreacting. You're just trying to control me, and I'm sick of it. I love you, I'm pregnant with your kid, and you're making a huge deal out of nothing. Her voice was sweet but dripping with sarcasm. That was her typical tactic: deny, deflect, lie. I told her, stop lying, Emily. I saw the messages. I know about Jake, about the sex. How long has this been going on? Are you even telling me the truth now? I was trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was falling apart. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or punch a hole in the wall. Her reaction: she scoffed again, rolled her eyes, and said, Jake's just a friend. He's family, Ryan. You're overreacting because you're insecure. The baby's yours, and I love you, but you're just making everything worse. That last part hit me like a punch. She was so callous, so dismissive of what she'd done. I couldn't believe how easily she lied, how she could look me in the eyes and make me doubt my own feelings. I felt like I was losing my mind, and then the anger took over. I told her I'd had enough, that I was done with her lies, that I was leaving. She just looked at me with that smirk, like she was enjoying controlling the situation. I turned and walked out, feeling a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep pretending that she was the woman I thought I married. The betrayal was too raw, too real. As I left that house, I felt a strange sense of clarity. If she was willing to lie and cheat on me while pregnant, then she wasn't worth my love or my trust. I decided I'd take some time away, think about what I wanted, and figure out how I was going to get through this. Deep down, I knew I'd have to make some hard choices, but right then, all I wanted was to get away from her and her lies. I also knew I had to prepare myself for what was coming next. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about my life, my future, and whether I could ever trust anyone again after this. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall, but I also knew I had to find a way to pick myself up. That's what this whole mess was about: learning to pick up the pieces of a shattered life and figuring out who I really was without her. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I knew I had to try. Over the next few weeks, everything in my life felt so surreal. I stayed away from Emily as much as possible, trying to distance myself from her bitchy smirks and all the lies I knew she was still spinning. I moved out of the house temporarily, staying at a friend's place, just so I could breathe and think. Every day I woke up with this heavy weight in my chest, frustrated and angry that I'd let myself be so blind for so long. I kept replaying all those moments when I should have seen the signs: her distant attitude, the way she dodged questions, the odd messages that I ignored or brushed aside, convincing myself she was just busy or stressed. But now, sitting alone, I knew better. I knew it was all a lie. She planned this all along, probably from the moment she found out she was pregnant, and I was just too clueless or too trusting to notice. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she lie to me, cheat with her best friend's brother, and then act like nothing's wrong? Every time I thought about Jake, I felt the rage boiling again. That bastard! How dare he? How could she sleep with someone like him, knowing what I meant to her? I couldn't wrap my head around how she could look me in the eye and lie like that. One night, I finally decided I needed to hear her side, if she even had one. I called her, and she answered with that usual snarky tone, like she was bored of me already. I told her I wanted to meet, to talk face to face. To my surprise, she agreed. We set a time to meet in a neutral place, a cafe near her place. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get some kind of confession, some hint that she was sorry or at least honest about everything. But I knew better than to expect remorse from Emily. Still, I needed closure, even if it was just to hear her try to deny everything again. When we sat across from each other, she was visibly irritated, throwing her hair over her shoulder like she owned the entire world. I looked right at her and said, "Tell me the truth, Emily. How long has this been going on? How many times have you lied to me about where you were?" She scoffed and rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Ryan, you're so damn paranoid. I told you I love you, I'm carrying your kid. You're just insecure because I don't give you enough attention. Jake is just family, that's all it is. You're overreacting as usual." I clenched my fists and said, "Stop lying, I saw the messages. I know about Jake, about the sex, about the baby. Did you even think I'd never find out? Do you even care how much you've hurt me?" Her face twisted into a sneer, like she was enjoying this, like she was finally in control. "You don't get to tell me what I can or can't do. I'm not some obedient wife who's gonna sit here and take your bullshit. I love you, Ryan, but I'm not gonna be your little puppet. If you can't handle that, then maybe you're not the man I thought you were." That was when I snapped. The tears I'd been holding back finally came, but not from hurt, no, from pure rage. I told her I was done, that I didn't want to be with someone who lied and cheated and played me like a fool. I told her I'd leave for good, and she just smirked again like she was glad she'd broken me. She said, "Good, go, you're better off without me. You're too weak to handle the truth anyway." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut one last time. I felt empty, like I'd lost the part of myself that believed in love and trust in forever. I kept asking myself how I'd let things get this far, how I'd been so blind, so trusting. I'd always thought I was a good guy, loyal, honest, straightforward. Yet she'd managed to destroy everything we built in just a few months. I realized then I'd been clinging to a fantasy, a lie I'd told myself about how perfect our life was. But the truth was, I was just a fool for believing she could ever be faithful, especially with her attitude and that bitchy, manipulative side of her. As I drove away from that cafe, I felt a cold resolve creeping in. I couldn't keep living in this chaos. I had to think about what I really wanted, whether to fight for her, to try and fix this, or just cut ties completely. Honestly, part of me was so angry that I didn't think I could forgive her, not ever. But deep down, I knew that whatever choice I made, I'd have to face the consequences, and that I'd never trust her again. The betrayal was too deep, and I knew whatever happened next, I'd have to be strong. Because being this hurt, this betrayed, it changes a man forever. The time after that meeting was the hardest of my life. I stayed mostly alone, trying to process everything I'd found out and what it meant for me. Every day I felt like I was walking on thin ice, unsure whether I was coming or going. The anger ebbed and flowed, sometimes replaced by a deep, almost suffocating sadness. I couldn't believe I'd been so stupid, trusting her, loving her, thinking we had something real. And now I was left with nothing but shattered illusions and the brutal truth. Emily had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I kept asking myself if I should fight for her, try to fix this mess, or if I should just walk away and forget her. The truth was, every time I thought about her, I felt a surge of rage. How dare she throw away everything we had? How could she lie so effortlessly? I kept picturing her with Jake, her lying face, her bitchy attitude, and the way she dismissed my feelings like I was nothing. It made me sick to my stomach. I'd never wanted to hurt her, but part of me secretly hoped she'd realize how much she'd screwed up and come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. She was too stubborn, too manipulative. When I looked at her now, I saw only the woman I once loved, warped into someone I didn't recognize. She'd become a liar, a cheat, and someone who looked at me as if I was just an obstacle in her way. I didn't want to be around her anymore, not until I could figure out what I really wanted. I had to decide whether to leave everything behind and start fresh or fight for a chance to rebuild what was broken. Honestly, I was exhausted just thinking about all of it. One night I finally made up my mind. I was tired of the pain, tired of the lies, and tired of feeling like I was losing control. I decided I had to confront her one last time, to tell her I was done and mean it. I reached out and asked her to meet me at her place. When she arrived, she was her usual bitchy self, smirking like she already knew she'd won. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Emily, I can't do this anymore. I found out everything. You cheated, you lied, and you were planning to keep it all hidden. You're carrying Jake's kid, and I don't want to be part of this anymore. I'm done with your games, your lies, and your attitude. I'm leaving, and I'm never coming back." She scoffed, crossing her arms, and said, "Oh, Ryan, you're so dramatic. You think you're the victim here, please. I did what I had to do to be happy. You're just insecure and jealous because I don't need you anymore. Your little ego is hurt, but honestly, I don't care. You're not the man I thought you were anyway. I deserve better." Her words cut me deep, but I refused to let her see how much she'd hurt me. I knew I was done and I was tired of pretending I was. I packed my things that night, feeling like I'd been through a war. It was bittersweet, finally taking control of my life, but also feeling like I'd lost everything I cared about. As I left her house, I looked back one last time and what I saw was a woman I once loved, now a stranger, selfish, manipulative, and so full of herself she couldn't see how badly she'd screwed up. I knew then that I'd have to rebuild my life from scratch, but I also knew I'd never forget that betrayal. It had changed me forever. In those quiet moments driving away, I realized something even more unsettling. I'd given her so much trust, so much love, and she'd just thrown it all away. That kind of betrayal doesn't fade with time. It leaves scars. But I also understood that I had to keep going for my sake, for the kid I was going to be a father to, and for my own survival. I told myself I'd take it one day at a time, learn from this hell, and try to find a way to trust again someday. But for now, I knew I had to get away from her manipulation, and start figuring out who I really was without her. The months that followed felt like a blur of pain and healing at the same time. I stayed away from Emily completely, cutting off all contact. Every time I thought about her, I felt that old rage bubbling up again, but I also knew I couldn't let it consume me. I had to find a way to move on, even if that seemed impossible at first. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the memories and focus on rebuilding my life. I didn't want to be the guy who got betrayed and did nothing, so I started seeing a counselor, not because I was weak, but because I needed to understand how I could ever trust again after all this. One of the hardest parts was facing the reality of the child Emily was carrying. I had to decide whether I was going to be involved or step back completely. Honestly, I didn't know if I could handle being a father to Jake's baby, especially knowing what Emily had done. But even with that anger and disappointment, I realized I needed to do what was best for the kid, not just for me. I reached out to a lawyer, started the process of separation, and got my own place. I decided I wasn't going to let her ruin my future completely, even if she'd shattered my trust. People kept asking me how I felt, and honestly, I didn't have a clear answer. One moment I was furious, the next I was numb. I wanted to hate her, but part of me also felt pity for how she'd let her bitchy attitude and manipulative ways ruin everything. I knew I'd be better off without her, but it still hurt knowing I'd been so blindsided, so played. That betrayal changed me, made me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. What finally helped was accepting that I deserved better. I deserved someone who wouldn't lie, cheat, or manipulate. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize the red flags early, and most importantly, to trust my instincts. I also realized that sometimes the people closest to us, those we love and trust, can turn out to be the biggest betrayal of all. That lesson hit hard, but it forced me to grow stronger. Looking back now, I feel a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I finally took control of my life, and sadness because I lost someone I once cared about deeply. But I refuse to let her betrayal define me. I've learned that trust is fragile, something you have to nurture and protect, and once it's broken, rebuilding is a long, painful process. Still, I have hope. Hope that someday, I'll find someone who values honesty, loyalty, and love as much as I do. So, if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: be careful who you trust. Don't ignore the signs, no matter how much you want to believe in the best. And if you find yourself betrayed, don't be afraid to walk away, no matter how hard it is. Healing takes time, but you'll come out stronger, wiser, and ready to love again, just with a little more caution. Because in the end, the pain teaches us what we deserve, and it helps us find the strength to move forward.